So, question, if an author's work is problematic, do you just rewrite it? So it's probably not news to many of you that it hit the news in the last week or so that many of Roald Dahl's books are being rewritten, and I quote, to remove colourful language. So Roald Dahl, I'm sure everybody is aware of Roald Dahl. He was a very prolific children's author. He did die in 1990, so he hasn't written anything for a fair while. But his works have sold more than 300 million copies worldwide. His books have been translated into 68 different languages. I mean, this guy is like the man when it comes to children's books. I read his books when I was a kid. I have read his books to my kids. And my parents read those books when they were young as well. So he's quite the institution within children's literature. And so it's no surprise really that a lot of authors and people within the bookish community have been slightly outraged at the idea that things within those books are going to be rewritten. So the argumentation for this, what sort of kicked this off, was that there are issues around cultural sensitivity within these books. And I quote, I think this is from The Guardian, campaigners seeking to protect young people from cultural, ethnic and gender stereotypes in literature and other media. So that's what they're trying to do. However, is that what they're doing? Is this an argument of sensitivity, or is this censorship? And a lot of people around this argument are quoting the fictional work by George Orwell, 1984, in which Orwell looked forward to a dystopian future where there was a lot of censorship. And one of the quotes from the book was, "Every record has been destroyed or falsified, every book rewritten, every picture has been repainted, every statue and street building has been renamed, every date has been altered, and the process is continuing day by day and minute by minute. History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right." So I think this is probably my main issue with this. These books are part of history. They reflect the time that they were written, and by rewriting them, we are rewriting them in a modern style for a modern audience, but they weren't written for a modern audience. They weren't written in 2023. They were written in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And so, as I said, many people have been up in arms. Very famous authors have come forward to show their displeasure with this. There was a tweet by Salman Rushdie which said, "Roald Dahl was no angel, but this is absurd censorship. Puffin Books and the Dahl estate should be ashamed." So Puffin Books, the British publisher of these books, are who commissioned this work to be done back in 2020. They hired whatever a sensitivity writer is to go in, read the books and basically take out anything that was insensitive or rewrite what was insensitive. So if we take the nostalgia out of it, which I think is fueling quite a lot of the anger around this issue, there is also some other troubling things here. Firstly, the author cannot give consent to his work being changed because he has been dead for 30 years. So yes, the Dahl estate has given permission, must have given permission for his work to be altered. However, they are not the author. And I think fundamentally a lot of people would agree that an author's work should not be changed without their explicit consent and without them personally changing the narrative or the wording within that book. Dahl himself rewrote parts of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory when it came up that it came across as racist. So I think that is the only time when I believe that rewrites or republishings of books should be done, is when they are done by the author. Going back to the George Orwell quote, this really is trying to change history, and I think that a lot of people learn from history, and taking some of these points out of Roald Dahl actually doesn't allow us to see the history that we came from. There is a quote, I can't remember who said it, about you have to know your past to know where you're going. And I really do believe that. And I think reading Roald Dahl books and picking out some of the more problematic phrasing and the way that he's done things is actually a learning point, particularly for children. And I found it quite insulting, really, that grown-ups, people who champion children's literature, don't believe that children are intelligent enough to understand that there are problems within that writing and have a discussion about it. I think actually if they sat down and spoke to a child, they would be very surprised at the level of understanding that that child can have. And by changing these books, it really removes that opportunity for discussion, that opportunity for growth, to understand what things will hurt other people and what things won't. And those conversations need to be had. We cannot wrap our children in cotton wool and pretend that no one ever says unpleasant things. No one ever, that the whole world is politically correct, because that is not the world we are sending our children into, and they need to be aware of it. We are creating a generation who are more likely to experience fear, anxiety, depression, because they have not been exposed to the things that cause those. So when they encounter them in their teens, in their young adult years, they're going to be completely new to them because they've been stripped out of all literature. Is that the way that we want to go forwards? Question. Also, interestingly, though Puffin Books are rewriting these books, there are other publishers in other countries who have flat out refused. So France, for example, the French publisher, will not be changing any of the phrasing in this book. So there's also disparity then between translations, which I mean you would have anyway because that's the nature of translations, but it goes to show that, you know, not everyone is on the same page here. And what is driving Puffin Books to make this really quite significant change in Roald Dahl's work at this point in time? And you can't help but think maybe this is a little bit of greed, given that they have just sold some of the IP rights to Netflix. Is this just a money-making scheme so that they can sell these books all over again, the PC versions? Maybe that's an unfair statement, but it seems a little coincidental that this is sort of timing out at the same time that they have sold those IP rights. Just a thought. I think the other very disturbing thing here is that this will set a precedent. So if we change the work of one classic author, modern classic author, however you want to define him, where does that stop? Where does that stop? Will we just rewrite all children's books that have problematic phrasing in? What about the Very Hungry Caterpillar? That has the word fat in. That is one of the biggest problems that they have with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, that that Augustus Gloop is called fat. So does that mean that our Very Hungry Caterpillar is no longer a big fat caterpillar? At what point does that stop? At what point do authors have a checklist of words that they are and are not allowed to use in literature, and descriptive phrases are then not allowed if they are seen to be insulting in any way, even regardless of the role of that character? It's quite, that is probably the most disturbing thing for me, that you could see classic works just be completely vanillafied. I know that's not a word, but you see what I mean, just toned down to a level where there's no colour left in the text because only certain words are approved for use in children's books. I don't know, maybe that's a bit of an apocalyptic statement, but but I think it is a concern. It is a real concern for people, because at the end of the day, it is censorship. It is taking words out of literature so that people can't read them. So when I was thinking about this video and I wanted to try and come up with a balanced argument, I found this really difficult because I can see so many negatives to this, and I would really invite people in the comments to let me know what they think of this, what they think the negatives and the positives are of these changes. And I think the biggest positive here is that I do think it's done, regardless of my Netflix comment, I do think it's actually being done with the best of intentions. I think they are trying to remove some things that may cause bullying in schools and bullying between children, and sort of create a safer reading space for them. But as I sort of mentioned before, I don't think we can wrap our kids in cotton wool. Actually, kids are pretty mean regardless of whether they've read Roald Dahl or not. I don't think that is the contributing factor here to whether a child knows the word fat or not. So I do think it's done with good intentions, but I just think they're misplaced. Also, I mean, is this the end of the world? We're talking about some minor changes, really, at the end of the day. Kids will never know the difference. Adults, yeah, we will, but we're not the target audience for it. So is it really a big deal? But we talk about minor changes, so I'm just going to run through some of the changes with you, because I think this is what frustrated me the most. That when I looked at the changes, I didn't really see the point in any of them. So I've also already mentioned the fact that Augustus Gloop in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory will no longer be known as fat. So I think there is a sentence in the book that says he is enormously fat. He will now just be enormous. And I don't see how that's less hurtful, really, but okay. So the other thing that is being done is that they are removing quite a lot of the genders from the book, which I thought sounded really odd at the time. But basically what they've done is, instead of the Oompa Loompas being small men, they will be small people, from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and then from James and the Giant Peach, instead of cloud men, they will be cloud people. I just think, is that worth causing all this hoo-ha about? Not entirely sure. And if they were men, then they were men. Surely we're still allowed to have men in children's books? Tell me what your thoughts are on that one. I would love to know. Again, all of these, I've already said, I think are quite ridiculous. But in The Witches, if you're unfamiliar with the book, witches all have bald heads, so they wear wigs. And now, though they have kept that, they have added a phrase into the book that says, there are plenty of other reasons why women might wear wigs, and there certainly isn't anything wrong with that. Okay. Okay. Mrs. Twit will no longer be ugly and beastly, just beastly. And they are substituting female for woman. Not sure. I'm not sure how that really makes a difference, if I'm honest. So Miss Trunchbull will, instead of being the most formidable female, will be the most formidable woman. And I think maybe the sensitivity checkers need to learn what alliteration is, because I think that was probably where Dahl was going with that one. And then the one that I think is almost most laughable is Matilda. Matilda. So when Matilda goes to the library, they have now changed the books that she picks up, and they have killed Rudyard Kipling, and they have killed Joseph Conrad, and replaced them with Jane Austen and someone else. And I just thought, right. Firstly, the age group that reads Matilda, you're talking what, 10, 11, 12? They're highly unlikely to go out and read Joseph Conrad, are they? So I don't really see why that makes any difference. I couldn't even remember what books were on that. I do remember she read Moby Dick. But I mean, like I said before, so many classic authors are problematic. That is the reality of our history. And yeah, that just seemed like a really odd one, because I don't those are still classic works of literature.
that so now we're telling children what classics they should and should not pick up as well, which they probably wouldn't even pick up until they were at least in their late teens anyway. Odd. So I really just wanted to start a conversation here to see what other people thought. Is this a good change? And if so, why do you think so? I am happy to be convinced. Are you of the same opinion as me, in which you think these are unnecessary and, quite frankly, scary changes to be making, changes to the works of dead authors? I would love to know. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are, and yeah, let's have a chat. All right, thanks for listening, guys. Bye.